Hello, my name is Kim Shepard, and today I'm going to talk to you about an article that I found in the Journal of Psychology and Theology. And the name of it is On Earth as It Is in Heaven, Healing Through Forgiveness. The overview of this presentation, I'm going to talk about the article, what it supports, the 4 types of forgiveness that it addresses, and the critique. Now, with that said, the authors Griffith, Lovelock, and Worthington basically hypothesize that does biblical forgiveness increase the mental and physical health of individuals? And basically, they pulled, this is a correlational study, and they pulled from theological sources, scientific literature, and other studies. They also looked at a couple of different types of people groups, but they didn't go into very much detail. For instance, they used victims and perpetrators, and they also pulled some from data from other people groups, and specifically domestic violence and substance use disorders. So with that said, the 4 areas that they address in this article of forgiveness are basically the first one, experiencing forgiveness by God, individuals experiencing forgiveness from others, practice responsible self-forgiveness, which I felt was important, and the 4th one is basically victims who are able to extend forgiveness to perpetrators. Let's look at the first area, and the first thing that I truly appreciate about this article is that it is totally a Christian worldview, and this article is thoroughly supported by scriptures and well explained. The first group of people that they talk about, basically they had 2 different types of groups, age groups starting with 50 to 92 and college age individuals, and then the 3rd group that they used were people leaving the program of a substance use disorder, and they found that there was an overall less depression, anger, and suicide in these groups. They also pointed out that if one could experience forgiveness by God, then there was potential for them to extend forgiveness to others and to themselves, which I thought was quite interesting. The second area of forgiveness in this study addressed being forgiven by others, and they particularly addressed areas by scripture and understanding that the needness to confessing sin and being forgiven by it. And the scriptures they used were James 5:16 and Ephesians 4:32. And they particularly looked at this area when addressing perpetrators, which I thought was very interesting. And they basically found at the end of this portion of the study that there was actually reduced negative outcomes and raise the quality of life of people who were able to receive and be forgiven by others. The next area, the 3rd area, is basically experiencing self-forgiveness. And this area I felt was very important, not only important, but had some stuff to say that was relevant. Worthington pointed out that specifically that individuals need to learn to manage the spiritual and social consequences of wrongdoings, and that in doing so that they experience shame, self-condemnation, regret, and that another area that they were looking at with this, they were looking at women who experienced domestic violence and people who had experienced traumatic events. And that they found that people who were able to go and experience self-forgiveness actually experienced decreased anxiety, anger, and violence. Next, the fourth area of forgiveness is extending forgiveness to others. And so this was quite interesting. They basically said that people who were able to work through and extend forgiveness to others, and there again, this was again based on a biblical model with support of scripture and explained it very well in this area, that they were able to experience better health, overall less stress. They had learned to forgive. They were able to forgive later on in life throughout their lifespan. They actually also experienced lower levels of anxiety and depression. And another important thing that they pointed out in this particular area was that they found that there were more negative cognitions, emotions, and behaviors associated with not being able to forgive others, and that this biblical model view and the scriptures and walking the client through this, they said that they found that they were able to replace those negative cognitions, behaviors, and emotions with positive ones, and made a strong case for supporting a biblical view for people who were willing to accept the tenets of Christianity. And I would like to state overall that Worthington made a statement that divine forgiveness foreshadows the outcomes of true salvation. I thought it was really interesting that they actually explained all four tenets of forgiveness within this understanding salvation, and it is a part of it. So that was very interesting. My critique of this article was I felt like this was a strong article with addressing the four areas. I appreciated that they addressed all four areas and that it wasn't lacking in that area. They did a very good job of pointing out scripture in each section with each area, and they did a very good job of explaining it through a biblical mindset and a Christian worldview. I feel like this article strongly supports that, and that if you're a Christian counselor or a counselor that is a Christian that ends up with a client that is a Christian, this article is easy to read and it's not very long. I felt like it could have been stronger in the area of more of quantitative study. It lacked more specifics and numbers, and when they talked about victims and perpetrators, they didn't go into details with that. Another assessment that I would assess this with that and critique it, that it lacked a developmental perspective, both a human developmental perspective and also a spiritual developmental perspective. I thought that could have added to it. But overall, I felt like this was beneficial and that it had complete biblical support of what it explained and described and how it works and why it works. And as a practicing clinician, I felt I would keep this article. Overall, I also want to state that if anybody doesn't have a Christian client or is not a Christian clinician, there are four other spiritualities, that religions that adhere to a forgiveness principle, and they are Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, and Judaism. And so with that, basically I will summarize that I've given you the overall view of the article, what it supported, and that it overall supported that biblical forgiveness model in all four different areas does increase the mental and physical health of people. It doesn't support strongly in some areas, but other areas it does. I talked about the four different types of areas, and I critiqued this article. With that said, that is all.